there's some remarkable facts to this story, right? And if you don't know, we have we have today Ashton Forbes, who's probably the world's leading researcher on flight MH370, which you can go into all the details about. But the bottom line is you just uncover this just amazing mystery related to this thing. It's over the course of the last, I think it's 8 to 10 years, right? It happened. I mean, look, it was a Malaysian flight that disappeared. So many crazy circumstances surrounding it, and it's clear that the U.S. government was involved in covering it up. It's clear that the Chinese government has been involved to some degree. What are your thoughts on where all this is going and what you're going to do after you kind of quit talking so much about just the history of what's come to you?
Yeah. I don't know that I'm necessarily the leading researcher in general related to the plane, but I've got to be pretty high up there at this point. I still think that maybe Florence DeChangi has that crown, if I'm being honest. Her book is really long and in depth, and I've spoken to her at length several times, just pinging ideas off her in general. With respect to the videos, though, the MH370 videos, I think it's safe to say that I guess the world's leading researcher on the videos in general. I'm looking right now at my evidence list that I put together early on. People said, you should build an evidence list. We did that. It's all very well categorized. You can find the link pinned to my profile if you want to check it out. I've got categories for every single aspect of the videos and the investigation in general. It's been 6 months of going hard. I remember one podcaster I talked to was trying to admonish me, saying how, well, other people investigate stuff for 10 years and they write a book or whatever. Well, it doesn't really matter how long you look into something so much as the body of knowledge that you dig up from it. So not only did we look into every aspect of the videos, assuming that if they're real, that we would be able to authenticate them. And I think we've authenticated essentially every aspect of them in general. But then also looked into the history of the plane going missing, which I think that's, both parts of it. It's almost two halves, where you have this half of these videos where you go, wow, can this really be what happened to this missing plane? And then you have this other half, which is this giant weird story about what was going on in the days after the plane went missing. Why was there so much obfuscation? How come we never found any plane with the official search, or even any pieces of the plane with the official search? And what does that all mean? And I think that what we've come to conclude is that it means that these videos are probably real, as crazy as it is to sound, but they kind of explain everything around what happened with the plane, why it was obfuscated, why there was apparently this cover up, and why we didn't find anything. I'd just say lastly is that with respect to the investigation into just the plane in general, from the videos, we were able to find out more about spy satellites than I think anybody in the world has figured out. And that was something I would have never, ever expected in my whole life. I would never have thought I'm sitting here revealing how spy satellite technology works just from deduction, from looking at what is just labeled as a satellite video. And that was absolutely incredible because, sorry, I know I said the last thing, but this is the real last thing, is that everything that we've found, me and the MH370X team, as well as everybody who's been contributing on social media, it's all open source information. It's all publicly available information. We didn't have any secret back alley meetings where people were giving us envelopes or folders or information like that. It was just all out there on the internet. And that's what I think is so incredible, because it goes and gives a template for how an open source grassroots investigation can operate, especially in this world we live in now, where there's so much fake news, if you want to call it that, or just misinformation and propaganda that gets pushed out, where you can say, okay, if you collect the information and you build your case, you can prove the lie and then potentially get to what the truth really is. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I'm glad I see Diamonds up here as well. I've seen Moneypenny join. Thank you guys for
Yeah.
jumping on.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, all right, guys. So jump into the little purple pill. Share the space, please. It only has 2 reposts. If you want to come up and join in the discussion, ask some
Hey, everybody.
questions. You got something to say about it, by all means. I can't wait to at some point. There's so much I want to talk about. I think the lithium ion batteries in the plane are important to me. I
Yeah.
think it. I think it is important, and I would love to have a conversation, especially with Diamond here, just to kind of wrap my mind around what the science could be around this. You talked a little bit about it a couple times, and you're big into the theoretical physics aspect of it, which is looking at it like it's a another dimension or portal to some degree, right? Or at the very least, what do you suppose happened with those three orbs? What let's kind of get into that if you don't mind.
Well, so do you want to do the battery situation or the orb
Well,
situation or? Hmm.
I think they're related. Do you not?
I don't necessarily think that they are. I think that some people have thought that. There might be some kind of connection. It's really hard to say in general. I definitely think that the idea that there is 487 pounds of dangerous lithium-ion batteries on this plane that stuck out right away. Right? You look at that and you go, nearly 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo bay of this plane. They missed. There's like three different pallets of it in three different cargo compartments. They missed two security screenings, and you just go, this is just recipe for disaster. You go look at the ATSB report and how they're packaged. It's very clear they were not packaged safely, and they were just stacked on top of each other so that if any of these batteries ignite, they're all going up. And early on, we knew that there was something wrong with those batteries like that, and we were trying to figure out, are they related to the orbs we see in the videos, or what's the situation? Is it just incidental? The connection that I would make is that we see an endothermic event in the thermal video. That's an absorption of energy as opposed to a release of energy, an exothermic event like an explosion. And when we see that, I was actually just looking back at my Dave Rossi Hard Truths podcast number 3, doing some editing on it, and he talked about that the event that we see could absolutely be absorbing the energy from those batteries. And why is that important? Because the thing about lithium ion batteries is they cause something called runaway lithium ion battery fire, is that they have so much energy in them. This is the reason why when you put them out, they just come back up again. It's not a situation, and all this stuff about the lithium ion batteries we had no idea about until we started digging into them. I think that a lot of people didn't even know how dangerous they were, myself included. And then once you find out about it, you see it everywhere. You go to the post office and you find out, they ask you if you have any in your envelope, which obviously doesn't have any lithium ion batteries, but they have to ask you anyway just because it's so dangerous. You go onto an airplane and they ask you your checked bags, do you have any lithium ion batteries in them? Because it's not like they just cause this fire that's like catastrophic. It's that they start this huge fire, billowing toxic smoke. You try to put it out, but then it just comes back up again, right? Like less than a minute later, 30 seconds later, and it just keeps happening. And we didn't even know in 2014 how dangerous they were. I'd like everybody who's listening who has access to Google to just Google FAA lithium ion battery fires. You'll find a chart, the top hit on the FAA's website, and it basically starts in like 2013 or 2014. And you'll see there's only like a few incidents in 2013 and 2014. And it's not because there were only so many incidents, because we weren't really reporting on them. They get banned in the cargo bay of passenger planes in 2015 from the FAA. And yet, if you look at that chart in the FAA, they just keep going up, even after they get banned in the cargo bay of passenger planes. And in the last 2 years, I believe it's like, I have to Google it myself, but I believe it's 72 or 74 incidents in each year. We're not talking about in the cargo bay. We're talking about like people's Samsung phone just spontaneously igniting, or their laptop battery spontaneously igniting. And then they have this whole protocol where they put it in this bag and then they just pour water and then they close the bag. And that's just one tiny little battery. And what I found out from talking to experts that pinged me about this, that have either worked and testified on the Hill, or they have like engineers that know about the lithium ion batteries, is that usually the most dangerous point is when they get first put together, because if there's a defect in them, that's usually what causes them to ignite, as opposed to what you might think where if it just gets too hot, which is another way it can happen, but it's more likely that it's based on defects. So finding out about all of this, like, I don't know about there being a direct connection to the orbs, but you could argue that maybe that level of energy there is what's allowing the orbs to kind of lock into the plane. Maybe, not really sure. I don't know how we would prove that. But definitely there's some element where you could imagine this event putting out the fire by sucking the energy from the batteries.
Well, and then I want to give Diamond's back. So, Diamond, if you want to chime in anytime, please do. I'll throw you the co-host invite again. If you haven't shared the space, please share the space, and we'll go to Money Pennies here in a sec. What I was going to say is, with when as it relates to the orbs and it relates to the lithium ion batteries, I think there's some mechanisms that are happening there, and I think all of those mechanisms include an aspect of electromagnetivity. Batteries are they produce a magnetic field. I think that's important, if they're to consider if you're ever going to talk about what the orbs were doing, or we want to get into some of that stuff. That's just my idea. You don't have to necessarily reply to that. Money Penny, what do you got? How are you?
Hey, thanks. I'm good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me in. I just wanted to give a bigger picture here. So I met Ashton through MH370 initially, many months ago. I don't know how long it was, but from a journalistic perspective, obviously I was a BBC journalist many years ago. Although I've still been reporting a lot on other sort of current events here in the UK. Um, what Ashton has unleashed is not just a story about MH370, even though that is big enough on its own. I just know there are a lot of people that say this is a whole load of what's it and they don't believe it. Even if you don't believe it, even if you want to put that completely on the side, what has happened from this is it's also opened up a huge parameter of fascinating science looking at different types of propulsion mechanisms that effectively we would put in a free energy capacity. That's number one. Number two, it's opened up a huge underlying military strategy by the US military, which has been repressed and suppressed, and has also opened our eyes to a lot of technology that is used particularly by the US military, but other military worldwide, that is beyond the technology understanding or awareness of the general public. Stuff that we did not know about is now coming forward, partly as a result of what Ashton has done. And number three, on a bigger level financially, because I worked in financial services 25 years, there are big financial scandals that we all know about. There is the collapse of the whole mortgage empire not so long ago. The biggest world financial scandal that has ever happened is Malaysia. It is still actually ongoing. It is that big. It involves so much ridiculous
1MDB.
complexity that all connects and subsumes and is around MH370, the government in Malaysia at the time, the US Department of Justice, Goldman Sachs, and another of unbelievably big partners that could still be associated now with what's happening in our current geopolitical world. So I'm just wanting to say, not only has he opened up this, but he has, through his own investigative persistence, actually potentially opened up something much bigger.
Yeah, and real quick, just to respond, I would say that I know there's some people I'm streaming at the same time. Some people are just kind of probably wondering. So, what's your opinion, Ashton, on everything? My opinion is that the MH370 videos are real, that they are authentic, that they tell a story of the plane that is backed by more evidence than any other theory out there by miles. It's not even close. We use more evidence in this theory than anyone else. We throw out the least amount of evidence. All we throw out is some of the satellite pings, and that's it, which I haven't put it out yet, but we have found that these SATCOMs are extremely easy to manipulate and to hack. So it would be very easy to falsify that evidence and make people think the plane went in the South Indian Ocean. But even if you don't believe that's fine. What I will say is that part of my belief doesn't come just from the videos. It also comes from the investigation, the deep dive, just having so much body of knowledge about now kind of how weird it was, the way the government was acting, and everything that led up to the investigation, the search, not finding anything, but also the connections that I've made since then, just in the investigation. The people that have reached out to me, I've got at least a half a dozen different stories of people that I don't have on the record, but have pinged me in DMs, sent me emails that claim to be in pretty high positions, like people that work for NASA, people that are on VFX companies, that all have stories that say, hey, this is real. Like, I can't go on the record, but don't stop doing what you're doing. Things like that, right? Which is wild, but it's not just that. The people that I've had on my Hard Truths podcasts, Salvatore Pius, Bob Grenier, Dave Rossi, Roy D. Herbert, these are all people who are scientists by the pure definition, like experimental scientists, ones that actually go out there and do the work, and they can explain what we see logically. So what we see in those videos is accurate to theoretical physics and engineering as well, which in my opinion, speaks volumes as to their legitimacy. How many times have you seen scientists, engineers, and physicists going to bat for random quote unquote UFO videos? Doesn't happen very often.
Diamond, you're back. Can you hear us? Can you talk?
Can you hear me now?
There you
Got
are.
you
What's up?
perfectly.
What's going on?
Nice to talk to you, Diamond. I think Diamond and I have had how many, 2 or 3? I don't know exactly how many podcasts we did together, but they were both great, or all 3 of them, however many it was.
Yeah, it was 3 now.
Awesome. Yeah, and Diamond, the thing I love about talking with Diamond is that I've done so many podcasts, but rarely do I talk to somebody where they know a huge amount of information regarding like what the government is covering up, related to the technology, and also they're not, in my opinion, like too into the woo, right? Like Diamond keeps it very grounded, which is also what I try to do as much as you can when you're talking about teleporting airplanes, right? But I try not to extend to other conspiracies and other elements that would open up the case and investigation into unwanted scrutiny.
Well, awesome. Hey, if you have not shared the space, there's over 100 people in here. There's only a few shares. Please share the space. We'll have a great conversation. If you want to come up and ask a question or you got something to add, please throw your hand up. We went to Money Penny. We got a couple listeners. Speakers. USERM, did you have something you wanted to jump in and say or follow the logos? Either of you two yet? Okay, take that as a no for now. Diamond, I got a question for you. With regard to the orbs, like I want to hear. I didn't. Let me just say this, Ashton. I think you said anti-gravity in one of the videos I saw you talking about. You said anti-gravity. What were your thoughts around the orbs and anti-gravity?
Yeah, so the thing is, anti-gravity is a bit of a misnomer, right? We use this term
I agree.
anti-gravity, but it's not like we're, like, I don't know, making gravity go away, right? It's, if anything, there's a couple things at play here. I think there's actually 2 different elements at play. One is that the orbs themselves are creating type of a bubble around themselves, which can displace them from localized space-time, which then allows them to have a localized relative mass of 0. And if you have no mass, then that gravity is not impacting you. But at the same time, you can see this geodesic forming. So it's like they're creating their own path of curvature that they're following. And that's why it looks like there's these train tracks almost in front of them, these black lines. So in my opinion, there's 2 aspects going on there. And then when people generally talk about anti-gravity, they're just talking about a force that is negating the force of gravity itself. So a lot of, if you look out there and find these various electromagnetic effects that people can create, it's just creating an opposite force that is now allowing something to kind of float. I think one of the videos I showed is that you can even do it with sound waves. So I can't say exactly, my scientific knowledge hasn't reached quite that point, but from a layman's perspective, that's kind of how I look at it. Is you have these 2 different things going on. And the way that Salvatore Pais describes the one where you see these lines in front of the orbs is like a laser that's shooting a high frequency pulse, which is able to vibrate or use vibration to break through the Schwinger limit, and essentially break through the fabric of reality to the underlying vacuum. And that's how you're seeing those cold lines. Now, again, that's speculative, but that's the best I've got for right now in terms of explaining it.
All right, I love it. Follow the logos. You wanted to please go ahead, jump in.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks. Ashton, I've interacted with you a lot. Good work. I hope to talk to you privately someday. But yeah, absolutely. The thing that's happening with these spheres, as well as any higher dimensional object, is that they're tuning into. So space and time have associated frequencies. So we think about like our 3-dimensional space as an XYZ coordinate space. You can extend that to include time. And so frequencies are basically tuning into not only places, but also times. And so my belief is that those spheres that were enveloping the MH370 were basically tuning themselves into a specific place, but also a specific time. And essentially what's happening is that space is moving around that, like that object is enveloped in a bubble that is essentially, it's not moving past the space and the time. The space and the time are moving past it. Maybe that's sort of a circular way of explaining it, but basically that's my belief. So I think Ashton is absolutely on the right track. Salvatore Pais and the guys that Ashton's talked to are heavyweights in this field. And they are coming at it with a very scientific viewpoint, but the truth is that to bridge this gap between what we are seeing visually with the videos of MH370, which, to be clear, have never been disproven, have never been debunked, what we are seeing in visual space is the exiting of a physical object from this particular coordinate, meaning XYZ time, four-dimensional coordinate system, to another position in that coordinate position, or in that coordinate system. So Ashton has been on the money this whole way. I've told him privately, I've told him publicly, you are on the right track. The real curious part about this to me is that, so I never watched this show, but how many of you have watched the show Lost? Like, the show, think about this for just 1 second, please. I implore you. How many of you have thought about the fact that the television show on a national broadcast within the US was telling this story? Okay, what does that tell you about time? What is the fact that a Hollywood production of MH370 years before it happened tell you about time? And I'm not trying to make the conclusion for you, but what I would propose is that there is information that can be sent backwards in time. So many films, such as Interstellar, have created this idea of like, oh, who is telling us this information? Oh, well, it's us from the future. That's not totally wrong, in my opinion. I think that is true to some extent. There is information being conveyed to us backwards in time. And what's quite beautiful about it is that it takes the form of art. Art is incorruptible. Now, if you have artwork that is corruptible, it's not art, it's propaganda. And many people who seek the truth, Shepard, you're the host, I've looked at a lot of your content. I know you do seek the truth. You know that it escapes the confines of propaganda. But propaganda can only manipulate. J.R.R. Tolkien said, evil cannot create anything new. It can only, I don't verbatim, I don't know it, but basically it can only retell existing stories. So all I would say is that we are getting information from many different vectors telling us about what reality is. And it is absolutely crazy. Like Ashton, from a concrete physical perspective, is unveiling how crazy this is, yet it happens to be the truth. There's a reason the saying reality is stranger than fiction exists. So keep your minds open, keep your intuition open to these signals, and I think you will find that not only is Ashton right, but we live in a place that is very heavily controlled, that is trying to mislead us all the time. Sorry, go ahead, Ashton.
Yeah, and so what I would say there is, so one thing I'm not sold on, and I don't mean to criticize your opinions, because I think that one thing you start to learn is that there is kind of a blur between reality and fiction when you start to think of things like teleportation being real, right? But I'm not sold necessarily on being able to break causality, which would be able to send information back in time. But there is this idea, if you believe in string theory, right, where you might have alternate timelines, alternate dimensions. And I kind of joke about that in some of my posts and replies that I make, which I do think is interesting to dig into. Absolutely, though, when it comes to like the XYZ axis, this is something that even I was re-listening to my podcast with Dave Rossi earlier today and editing it and pulling out some clips. And he mentions that as well with respect to the orbs, is that you have 3 orbs, and this is the minimum number that you need in order to create a 2-dimensional shape in a 3-dimensional environment. And this is where he proposed the 4th orb hypothesis, which is that your 4th orb is what determines where the object's going to go, so that those orbs are mapping the plane. And if you were to scrunch time down, like you were mentioning, then you would see them basically making a sphere around the plane, which in my opinion has to be some sort of mapping or tracking or however you want to think of it. And then they switch this orientation to a ring formation, which I don't think is random. I think that ring formation where they're going vertically around the plane is literally preparing for the event that's about to occur, when they converge on the plane, that also seems to have purpose, right? Like if you're jamming magnets together that have the same polarity, you're gonna have this very strong
Yes.
repulsion effect.
Yep.
And that's what I think is the trigger for them to slingshot. And he's actually even mentions that word slingshot, like a rubber band, from one location to the other, where the
Straight
fourth
to
orb is.
Diego Garcia, Ashton.
Hold on, Diamond. You gotta jump in here. I can't stand to see you sit here and listen to all of this without talking.
I want to bring it back to the orbs and the technology behind that, because it was like 45, maybe 50 years ago, Bob Lazar described the tiny reactor that was in this so-called extraterrestrial spaceship, and he described how it could be used. Now, if this actually comes from a distant star, let's say a star system, some of these craft, well, they would have to have the same technology that we looked at during that, the three orbs creating a wormhole, because you couldn't just use the ship the way it flies around the Earth now with that tiny reactor. You would have to go faster than the speed of light to go to and from, to get to your destination, so to speak. So I think that the technology has been around for decades. And why are people just interested in it now? That's the interesting thing. Because Bob Lazar talked about element 115. He talked about this tiny reactor that's like 12 inches across, which is probably clearly the technology that's inside those orbs.
Yeah, and on that front, it was interesting because when I first started talking to the engineers and the scientists, I thought, okay, this must be some kind of element 115. There's some exotic element that's being used as like a fuel source. But interesting, it seems like that's not even necessarily a requirement, because we also have this capability when you start to dig into this technology of opening up a system to the vacuum energy of space-time. And Dave Rossi on that same podcast I was referring to even talks about there being enough energy in just the vacuum of space-time or in a glass of water to like destroy the entire planet if it was harnessed correctly. And that's where you start to realize, like, you might actually just be able to suck energy in real time with a system where you don't even need element 115. Now, it's not to say that element 115 is not necessarily real. It could actually be a real element that can produce these types of anti-gravitational effects, but it just might not be necessary. And I thought, wow, that even opens up the possibilities even more at that point. And I actually do believe Bob Lazar is telling the truth. I just think that he comes off as a very earnest guy. He, like me, comes across like a normal person that was in an extraordinary situation, that wanted to do what was good for the world, and that we ignored him for decades, and he just kind of drifted back into his own thing, and people used whatever they could against him, whatever forms of any weakness he had, right? He, I don't know, invested in a brothel, or I don't forget what all the different things are. Oh, his education background, we can't figure out all the stuff, and whatever they can find on him.
They're brutal about the way they attack. I heard you talking a little bit about that on one of your podcasts, or trying to get you fired from your job. I've experienced this twice now. It's unbelievable how these people act.
It makes me so angry. It makes me so angry to see what people are doing to Ashton.
Yeah, and I think that, just to be honest with you guys, I expected at least a little bit of that, maybe even all that. Before, my profile picture used to be an anonymous face mask, the Guy Fawkes face mask, right? And my username used to be something different as well. And it wasn't until the Confessionals podcast was about to drop that I changed it and revealed myself. And I was thinking about all these people that have been attacked, even people like Elon Musk that was out there when he got attacked for buying out Twitter, Bob Lazar and the people in the UFO community and how they got attacked. And I said, well, okay, I got to get ready for this storm that's going to come. Because the reality is, when you start talking about this kind of stuff, it's not just the government coming at you with this information, but it's also the people that don't want it to be real, that their whole worldview is threatened if this stuff is real, right? And they
It's the Mick Wests. It's the Mick Wests, right?
Yeah, and I definitely was aware of Mick West beforehand as well. And there's a lot of people like him that they're just, it's so ironic because they have this pretentious attitude that like they are the ones that are the arbiters of truth and they're the gatekeepers of truth. And if anyone thinks outside of their tiny worldview that they must be crazy or they can't process logic, when it's exactly the opposite. It's that they're the ones who, they don't know anything about science, they don't dig into it, they don't try to understand anything, they just try to do this self-soothing where they try to find something that will poke a hole in something that seems incredible, and then they kind of claim it's debunked and move on. And I saw it a lot before I dug into this case. And that's why, too, I realize you have to be very careful about how you reveal this kind of information, because it can upset a lot of people. So if there's people out there that go, oh, these videos are debunked, I saw some guy says there's a VFX that's a match. Well, first of all, it comes from this guy Mick West. Everything leads back to him. I found out. But also that's fine. If you don't want to believe it's real, I'm not here to push it on you, right? That's not my view. I just want to slowly awaken people up to this idea that even in the UFO sphere and realm, the stuff that these celebrities, UFO celebrities, are telling us is just surface level. Like it's, having aliens be real or there being floating crafts, that seems neat, right? But the stuff that really, really will impact people is learning like what this technology is capable of. The idea of force fields, cloaking devices, medical healing,
Yes,
fusion
that's
power
exactly
in the palm
right.
of your hand, free energy, then teleportation, and then the big one is doomsday weapons. So once you start to realize that those things can be real, then you're like, whoa, the rest of this just seems kind of like a sideshow, right?
Yeah, I wanted to. That's actually I was gonna jump in a second ago, and you landed in the exact same area. I think it's more exciting when you get to talk about stuff like this. It's not necessarily about waking up the masses, but more about finding people who are of the level of investigation with you, who can understand it, who want to go deeper. To find others that you can bounce ideas out, against. I think right now, we're in this era where we're realizing so much of the science that we've been taught just isn't true. Gravity, for example, I've been stuck on studying gravity for 6 months now. It's wild, to think about what it really is versus what they've told us that we've all just accepted and parrot now, like we're all experts because we were taught something in a ninth grade classroom. There are a couple hands, so let's go to Money Penny, and then we're going to go to Omar. If you haven't retweeted the space, I'd ask you to do that. Please go ahead, you two.
Great, thank you. So timing. I, having had many years investigating many different things all across the world that are nothing to do with this, would say timing is not a coincidence. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things that the speakers have said in the past 20 minutes or so. I'll just make you think. So if you look at my profile, you will find that I've posted in the last 2 weeks about 6 different things that are very relevant to that are happening now in today's world. So start with something simple like Russia, Ukraine. Okay, bit of a war going on there at the moment. All very, very controversial. And as part of all of that, if we look at the history of what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, we also have to take into account planes that were shot down in the southern part of Ukraine, a Malaysian plane, MH370, I think it was, that was shot down in the southern part of Ukraine, or was it Russia? I don't know. But do you know that over 300 passenger aircraft have been hacked, taken over, remotely controlled in the past year, and that is a 20% increase, and that most of that has come apart because of something called fly-by-wire, which is a technology that very simply allows a plane, when it goes onto autopilot, to be run by a computer, which makes it bloody vulnerable and means that even back to 9/11, you can go online and find some very, very convincing, and I don't know one way or the other, conspiracy theories that tell you the 2 airplanes that went into the towers on 9/11 were not the airplanes you thought they were, but they were actually greyed out unmanned drones that were flown in a fly-by-wire capacity. We have the film Oppenheimer tonight on the stage winning awards. That's somebody called Einstein, isn't it? Who fled from the Nazis. And German things like plasmoid technology, the use of gravity, magnetism, those things that are around our Earth that we probably haven't even looked into. The German scientists that were paid lots of money and brought over by the Soviets or by the United States, who were put into laboratories to start making bioweapons in 1951. And then we look at 1973 when we had Kennedy and we had an assassination, and we had a problem that all the space exploration at the time was being hidden. But we then have WikiLeaks that brought out all the UAP Cablegate that are also on my profile that will show you that the US military, and these are all in cables on WikiLeaks, you can see them for yourselves, Kissinger signing off projects for US technology to go out in 1973 and measure the radiation coming from celestial sources that they were looking at in the 1970s over parts of Argentina. This is not a coincidence to me that all this is happening at this time. And the UAP disclosure being on the board at exactly the same time, none of that is coincidence. And I think this is an opportunity to break out a whole lot more than just what happened to MH370. And I think it's bloody brilliant. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you for that,
Kreishley.
Mike. Hey, Omar, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, Shepard. And first time joining a
We won't be
space
dealing
like
with
this,
Kreishley
so it's
anymore.
a pleasure that we get to
Kreishley,
talk
you're an
about a topic
embarrassment to
that's,
humanity.
you know,
Just want to let you
not
know.
largely
Never
forgotten,
send
but it
somebody a
doesn't
message
get
like this.
brought up that
This
often.
just shows you're the loser.
It
Don't
happened,
ever
you
do
know,
this,
as
chat.
many
For everybody else and all the other
that know
retarded
it in
debunkers, I
2014,
hate using
so
that
we're
word, but
right
when you
around the
make posts
10-year
like
mark
this,
of the
you
disappearance
automatically lost.
of
So
MH370.
Kreishley, never come back. Thank you.
And I kind of went down a path where I tried to study it and learn more about it. I have a fascination with everything aviation, and
Yeah, Kreishley's a loser,
especially
guys.
this one because
and
it's such a
she
mysterious
completely
case of a
discredited
plane
herself.
that literally disappeared.
She didn't do what I asked either,
And
for the record.
a lot of questions that I kind of brought to
That's a
my
big
own
problem, is they just
attention
ignore
was
me,
the
right?
fact that there was some debris that was found across the coast of Madagascar and
We're going
Africa.
to get back to the topic here.
Has there been any credibility to this debris? And there was some speculation as to the person who even found it. There was some questions there
Let's see where we
too.
got the debris.
And
It's
the
up here, I
debris
think.
also was missing a lot of, you know, information that's kind of like a serial number for a plane. It was, a lot of it was missing or been maybe manipulated. Do we have any more information on what exactly was found, and could it be remnants of another plane, if not of MH370?
Yeah, good question on that. So everybody asks about the debris, right? Because there's two aspects that keep this narrative of pilot suicide alive. One is these Inmarsat pings, which you're going to hear a ton of fake experts, and I'm just calling them fake because they are. They don't have any real relative expertise related to satellite pings. They came up with their own novel explanation for how to rationalize those pings. And as I pointed out, those SATCOMs are easily hackable, and all it would take is flipping around one number, and next thing you know, they're thinking this plane's in the South Indian Ocean, right? The other thing is that this debris that washed up in the Reunion Island, which is in Africa, right, 3,000 nautical miles away from where the plane crashed. No debris washes up in Australia, despite the fact that it's much, much closer. So what they did here was they ran these models, and models are not science. That's not how science works, is making a model. That's how you come up with some self-soothing explanation for what you want to be true. And they threw some debris in the water and some boards. And they immediately found out there was no way it could get 3,000 miles. And so what they do? They ignored that. They said, oh, just kidding, guys. And then they had the Americans, who are actually probably implicated based on the videos that we've got, give them a 777 flapper on. And they do a new model. And very quickly they decide, oh, yep, this will work. This will get the stuff over to the Reunion Island. And it's actually highly scrutinized by several people. They claim that no, there's no way that could have got there, and that the lepus, the barnacles, would not match what actually showed up with this flapper on that did wash ashore. So I think it's pretty absurd that this idea that there was a couple pieces that washed up in Africa somehow proves that the plane crashed near Australia, 3,000 miles away, especially when we didn't find a debris field. That is the number one thing. No debris field for a 777. Now, lastly, the debris that was found, there was a flaperon is the biggest piece, about 8 feet long, out of a 100-foot long wing. It was matched and connected and brushed away and just hidden where no one else can look at it by a non-unique serial number. A part number was used. The media does not report on this. If you Google MH370 flaperon serial plate, you'll find that the serial plate was actually missing, the unique serial plate that should have been on the flaperon. They claim it washed off, even though it would have been bolted on towards this part. And that would have conclusively said that that's from MH370, as opposed to a part which is going to potentially be related to another 777. Now, there was a couple other pieces as well. They're even tinier, much tinier pieces that were also tied to the plane. I think they used like paint and stuff like that to claim that it's part of the plane, right? And then there were some other pieces as well that don't really get talked about, but have like burn marks on them that actually have the honeycomb pattern of a Boeing airplane that they couldn't directly potentially tie to the plane. But I've done a couple pieces about those, because with the fire scenario, as well as this idea of this kind of teleportation. That debris, there's no inconsistency, right? A couple pieces could have burnt off or come off the plane. They could have had the plane parked at Diego Garcia, took the plane apart, thrown some in the water. And actually, if you look at the drift patterns from where they claim the plane crashed goes right past Diego Garcia before it gets to Reunion Islands. You could actually argue it makes more sense that the debris would have been thrown in the water near Diego Garcia and then landed and washed up in Reunion Islands rather than near Australia, where we should have found at least a couple pieces that washed up on the shore of Australia, but nothing does. So overall, the debris is not inconsistent at all with the scenario that we've put forth here on the MH370X investigation, but the lack of debris is a huge inconsistency with the idea that the plane crashed into the South Indian Ocean, because there should have been thousands of pieces of debris, bodies, luggage, pieces of plastic. A lot of the plane is made of very light metals and plastic, as well as like all the flotation devices and chairs, all this stuff. Like, if you look at other plane crashes in the water, you're going to find debris huge. And especially when it's in the water, it starts to spread out. It would have been so large, it would have been unmistakable. We actually would have seen it the very next day on satellite. Not even just us, but probably other countries as well, like United States, China, Russia, etc.
I was going to offer 2 points there. You're right. We would have seen, because you've already proven they had the technology to track it right. The satellite technology, it was advanced enough that they would be able to notice that. And then secondly, I'd offer this. I don't think if the plane would have ended up somewhere safe and sound and they could have pulled parts off of it to dip into the ocean, I think they would have done a better job of doing that.
May I say something really quick, Shepard?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what Ashton is talking about in regards to the identifiers you referred to on the wreckage of the plane, so-called. So I'm from a computer technology programming background, and there's this term called UUID, Universally Unique Identifier. Is a 128-bit label used in information in computer systems. It's basically like this almost social security number looking series of numbers that makes a part universally unique. Right? Meaning, like, there's not supposed to be a single other instance of that. Now, in theory, yeah, it's a series of numbers that could be replicated, but in reality, it's not plausible at all. And Ashton, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only piece of identifiable information referenced in regards to the so-and-so called wreckage found along the coast of Africa did not have a universally unique identifier. In fact, it had an identifier that was at least referenced on at least one other plane, if not more. So UUID is extremely important here because we need something from this wreckage that recognizes MH370 as universally unique. And I don't think to this point anything has ever been found that universally uniquely identifies the wreckage as belonging to MH370.
Yeah, that's the unique serial plate was missing. And yeah, in databases we have that. In my job we call it the code value. It's a unique number as well, and that's why I think that's so important. To me, the issue with it isn't necessarily how many other planes could have had it, because in terms of our theory, there's no issue with that being from MH370. But the fact that the media lies about it and deceives people, that's the weird red flag for me, is that they don't tell people that it was missing the unique serial plate, right? And that when I talk to people, one of the things that a lot of people keep bringing up is, oh, well, they found this piece and they confirmed it was connected to MH370, right? But they missed that part. And it's like, if they're trying to be honest, they should mention that the unique serial plate was missing, because that's a big red flag in terms of the authenticity of the piece in general.
Yeah,
it almost seems like they're trying to build a narrative, right?
Yeah, that's actually what I was referring to as well, the serial plate.
Yeah, it's a vector for disinformation. It's actually a vector in which you can to modify or manipulate the information. It's
almost like a VIN number for a vehicle, right, guys?
Exactly.
Correct.
But for a plane.
And so I think we've hit enough on that. One other thing I want to mention as well is I haven't put this piece out yet, but there's also a lot of question around the engine data. So the Wall Street Journal actually retracted a piece early on where they were told by somebody that Boeing and Rolls-Royce confirmed that the engines had shut down properly, meaning that this plane would have landed somewhere. And this was, I believe, right around the time where the South Indian Ocean narrative was developed. And all of a sudden that got retracted. And the question there is, well, somebody was told that information, right? Like, why would somebody lie about that kind of information? And the real big question is, where's the Rolls-Royce engine data? I had people in my replies saying that Rolls-Royce would have been getting pings every 15 seconds. And the narrative out there is, well, Malaysian Airlines didn't pay for the service, therefore they didn't have it. But my guess is that that was still happening. I don't think you probably don't turn that off. You probably just don't, if you don't pay for it, you just don't get that information like shipped to you. But I find it extremely unlikely that the Rolls-Royce engine data was not still transmitting, that Rolls-Royce doesn't know exactly what happened to the plane, right? And I think there's even stuff that you guys can go find in Google, and you'll find that early on, there's a lot of question about whether or not the plane kept flying for another quote unquote 5 hours, which if you do the math on the 5 hours, you realize that that's right around the same time where we have the plane disappearing out of the sky in 2 videos. If you say that the total flight was about 7.5 hours, and then you take away the 5 hours, now you got like 2.5 hours. And if you start at 1630 UTC, then you get to about 1900 UTC. And we're saying the plane disappeared at 1840 UTC. So it's like you do the math there and you go, wait a minute, did this plane really disappear? Like actually like the same time and location where we're saying in the Nicobar Islands? Because there seems to be this narrative around it. In fact, the very next day, the time that they said that they lost contact with the plane was 1840 UTC, the exact time when we've been pointing out the plane disappears. And then they change that time days later and they go, oh, no, it was 1815 or 1822. And you're going, but wait, you guys can Google this right now. I'm not making this up. They literally said Subang Air Traffic Control lost contact with MH370 at 1840 UTC. Nobody even goes and looks at that. It's like the information that comes out the very same day the plane goes missing, that's the stuff that I'm looking at hard, right? Because that's before they can develop a cover story. That's the real information coming out that's being unfiltered.
Can I also bring up the fact that like an innocent woman off the coast of the Nicobar Islands literally witnessed this plane coming down, as you've said many times, Ashton. Like that, like it corroborates everything you're saying, and it really bothers me the fact that eyewitness testimony is so readily discarded in today's world. Because, by the way, just so everyone knows, eyewitness testimony is an acceptable, admissible form of evidence in the court, right? In the United States, eyewitness testimony is absolutely admissible evidence. And we have this innocent woman, Ashton, you can probably clarify. I don't know if she was on her own or if she was someone else, but like literally watching this plane to the moment of its disappearance off the Nicobar Islands. I mean, that has to count for something.
Yeah,
Well, that seems weird to me. That's weird. She corroborates the disappearance at the exact moment that the satellite image is, same location as well.
So yeah, let me clarify that. And Logic, if you just put your hand up, we got some people with hands up as well. So I want to make sure we're getting
Thank
people
you.
in the orderly fashion here, as opposed to everybody just jumping in.
I'm just speaking like we're in a conversation, dude.
No, I got it. But we got to have a little bit of order on this. So with respect to Catherine T, that's one of the huge witnesses. So, and I 100% agree with what Follow the Logic is saying there, is that all of the witnesses, we've got 19 witnesses that corroborate a fire event, and they've all been discredited because they had to build a phony narrative that's out there. And I think that humans should be believed way over we start to believe in Excel spreadsheets, especially when you've got 19 of them corroborating the same event on the same timeline. And Catherine T was in the Nicobar Islands going to Phuket, Thailand from India, sees a glowing orange plane flying low with black smoke coming out of the back of it, and that it's descending and it's coming from the right direction according to the official data. At the same time, around 1840, I actually spoke to her over the phone, and that's the time she told me. She told me that she felt pressured by the experts to change her time to fit their narratives. And when you look at the videos, you can see this plane flying low and descending, and we can see this smoke coming out of the back of it, and the glowing orange would be coming from the bromine in the Halon 1301 fire extinguishing gas, causing a chemical reaction where this bromine halogen gas, which is a glowing orange gas, is permeating throughout the plane, right? So you look at this and you go, she didn't make this story up, right? And every investigator I talk to, they just dismiss her. They just claim that she's making it up. But if she is, then she's been in on this for 8 years, right? And she hasn't changed her story. She's really committed to that if that's the case. Same with people like Mike McKay, who sees the plane on fire when it first goes dark, and he loses his job over it. Like, I think this idea these people are making these stories up where the plane actually was is absurd to me. So let's do some hands, though.
Yeah, awesome.
Shepard,
Thank you.
go
Okay,
ahead
I've
and
been. Yep, you got it. So we'll go Serhi, and then Xander, and then Chai.
Hello, guys.
Welcome. How are you?
Fine. My name is Serhi.
You're coming in a little fuzzy there, Serhi. Is your mic clear?
1 second, please. I'm just my role.
Can't hear you, brother. Can you make another adjustment on your mic if you don't mind?
Yeah, now it's fine.
Yeah.
There you go. You're better now.
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, okay. And I heard that you talked about Oppenheimer, and I have my opinion about nuclear weapons. Mm. So I wanna speak with you about nuclear weapons. So there was situation about Hitler. I think that Hitler had some special weapons with technologies which other country didn't have. So he used them to attack, and after war ends, countries started to think how they can protect themselves against some, what you some unexpected, and they understood that it must be some big rocket what could destroy big force, or could be some dangerous. So I think the nuclear power is protection from real weapons, and that was what coming, what in Ukraine, Gaza, and other. It's some not so big wars what could be. So it's Oppenheimer. It's like our savior, because without these weapons, wars would be worse than we have now.
Well,
And
how are you relating this to the MH370? Oh, I'm so sorry. I muted you. I apologize. How are you relating this to the MH370 conversation? And you'll have to unmute yourself. I apologize. I hit the mute button. Sir, you're still on mute. You're going to have to unmute again.
Okay, well, there
okay,
he is.
yeah.
Yeah, so go ahead and just try to land
it's-
it and ask your question, Serhi. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, about this theme, I don't know anything. And one more thing I want to say about time. People think that we can, travel in time, but time is like a thing what keep going. We can't, it's like a third rule of thermodynamics that we can't, count zero of heating, or of temperature. So time is same, and this is like gravity, and you can only go, through the time, like go faster in time, but in when you will come from that special place, I will not speak about this technology, but you will be like older than others. And
Yeah, so I think I'll get what you're getting at here, is the idea of time dilation. All right. So first of all, I think there's 2 points. I hope I'm addressing them accurately here. is, first of all, one of them is the idea of what are the weapons that go beyond nuclear weapons, right? And what we're talking about related to this kind of technology, which requires a unification theory of quantum field mechanics and general relativity, is something that goes well beyond nukes. In fact, even Bob Greenyer on my Hard Truths podcast mentioned that this type of thing could be used as an annihilation of a nuke. Like you could just render a nuke inert, right? And then the other aspect is time dilation. The faster you move, time dilation is basically the universe correcting itself when someone moves faster, or fast as the speed of light. And the idea, this comes from like the movie Interstellar, where the more mass you're next to, the slower your time's going to flow. And the faster you go, I believe the more mass you kind of gain as you move, increase your speed. So the idea is that your time's going to slow down. So from an observer's perspective, relative observer's perspective, if you are near more mass and you're looking at someone who's near less mass, they're going to look like they're moving super fast. If you're somebody who is out near less mass looking at someone near more mass, it's going to look like they're slowing down and moving in slow motion. But really what's happening is time is this fluid symmetry that does not flow equally throughout the universe. And that's really important to understand. And I hope that everybody kind of looks into that if you don't believe me, because it has been proven to be true. Let's do some other questions. And if we could just try to keep to the point and what your question is and try to keep it relevant to MH370, would be great.
Yeah, perfect. Xander, then Chai, and then we'll go to Told after that.
Hey everyone. Hey Shepard, thanks for the mic. Ashton, big fan. Loved your conversation with Dave Rossi. You guys are both legends to me, so I really appreciate that. I hope you guys do some more. Just a comment and a question. Comment about the orbs. I'm not very familiar with the UFO community that much. I'm starting to get more and more into it, but I'm more interested in the advanced technology, government cover-up side of things. Also focused on like advanced technology, CERN, that kind of thing. So when it comes to orbs, I was listening to one physicist, I'm sure someone else has heard this, talk about the metaphysical properties of the circle and the idea that we can only comprehend a circle because it's within our kind of dimensional properties. And basically a lot could be contained within that. And, you have like time as in the West, people believe it's a straight line. In the East, people believe it's a circle. So, I don't know. There's just something about these orbs that, there's definitely more than meets the eye, but I like thinking they're just orbs at face value. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there for sure. As well as I love what Logos had to say about quantum propaganda. I do think that's a real thing, but that's kind of besides the point. My question is, now that you've got the snowball rolling and that you're retiring, what are the biggest, I guess, threads to pull still or unanswered questions you might have? So yeah, that's my question. Thanks again for the mic.
Hey, Xander, appreciate you, man. Appreciate you following both myself and Dave. He's one of my favorite people on this planet. Super glad to have met him in general. Super, super smart guy, and he's really young. I imagine him becoming very influential in the future. With respect to threads to still pull, there's really just not a lot, right? I mean, part of the reason why I am stepping away from the investigation is there's not much more to uncover. The pieces that I still have left are looking at the Rolls-Royce engine data and going into that. Talking about the Immersat SATCOM and how that can be hacked, and then the debris drift pattern model analysis they did. Those are really, in my mind, the three aspects that are kind of left with respect to the investigation. And I've started putting together links and evidence related to them, and I'll probably be pushing that out this next week. But otherwise, there's not much more. To me, then the next level is understanding the science and helping to try to prove that the science is there and getting a visual or getting like the papers and stuff more eyeballs on them by just using my influence, or I don't like to say influence, but let's say number of followers I have, right, to show people those papers and try to get them in front of like some of these science influencers and stuff that are out there. Because they have been getting published, right? And one of them was Bob Greenyer's paper that showed like COP is greater than 1, which is coefficient of performance, and that is essentially over unity, that there's more energy coming out than what is going into that system, and that type of stuff. So that's kind of going to be my focus after retiring from the MH370 investigation, is doing anything I can to show the science to be real.
Ashton, let me ask you a follow up on the science part. Have you ever heard of the Thunderbolts project in the Electric Universe?
The electric universe
Theory.
stuff I have been digging into, and that was actually a theory. It's interesting how there's all these connections to things that I was just theorizing before. And one of them was that I don't think we needed extra mass to explain dark matter, that magnetism and electromagnetism could potentially explain it. And I do like the idea that, you know, that is a better explanation in my opinion for what's going on. There's also this idea that I really like as well related to dilation theory from Roy D. Herbert, that if you think of information as constantly getting more and more complex, like a line constantly getting longer and longer as more information kind of just gets created into the world, even on the quantum scales, that eventually that gets to a point where it starts to create its own gravity. And so therefore you can come to this idea that the more complexity that exists in the universe, the more gravity there should be. So therefore the more complex like a galaxy gets, the more gravity you're going to have. Therefore the more that can explain the excess kind of stickiness that we see, that we describe as dark matter, which we don't actually see visually. But yeah, I like the idea of magnetism, electromagnetism. That's why I tell everybody now that early on I figured out that electrical engineering is really the mystery science, the one that gets you to the secrets of the universe.
Exactly.
Right?
Electrical. I just watched Thunderbolts Project video. I watch all their stuff. They just talked about how they would rather have an electrical engineer working with them than a mathematician, just because they mathematicians lose the philosophy and the understanding and the mechanics aspect of things. They have trouble with the cause and effect.
Yeah, and the other one, what was I going to say? Crap. I lost my train of thought there. The thunderstorm generator as well is another thing, which isn't the Thunderbolt, but thunderstorm generator by Malcolm Bendall. I think he's legit. I think that he also has been attacked by disinformation because he's legit. It's basically an engine that produces zero emissions, or next to zero, like reduces emissions by 99.9%, and that it creates these plasmoids using electromagnetism, essentially, and the two different counteracting or opposite spinning circular
toroidal. Dipoles. Yeah, the dipoles.
Toroidal.
Yeah, and the thing about that then is that there's very, very rich people and powerful entities that are looking into that technology, and that could be just one rudimentary form of the type of technology that can lead to a lot of the other stuff that we were talking about. So I would definitely take a strong look at Malcolm Bendall's work, the vortex tube, and the thunderstorm generator for sure.
I've been saying that a long time. I'm going to be quiet, but Shepard, will you please come back to me on this topic? Yes, I know more than Ashton does about this, and no disrespect Ashton, but please.
Okay, well, let's go to Chai and then Professor Carol. And if anybody else, get your hands up if you guys want to speak. I just had a couple more on stage.
Okay, thank you, Shepard. And sorry, Logos. I'm not sure if Logos is just unable to raise his hand. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, Ashton, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I just have a question.
Let's not follow
like how, first of all, how do you know that this flight was a real flight? And secondly, it's like, how do you know that this wasn't just set up so that you go down these rabbit holes?
Well, the first one, I mean, I think to some point, you know, for me, you work backwards. You don't assume that everything's fake, is that you assume everything's real and you systematically remove information that simply is not supported by facts and evidence or logic and reason. And that's the only way I think you can go through the world. Otherwise, you go through the world thinking that everything's fake, right? And so to me, that's the way you have to look at it. Now, with respect to how I know that this isn't some kind of setup, it's because there's no story that makes sense for that to be the case. To me, the only thing that would make sense with regards to these videos being fake is if they were faked by an intelligence community, either a foreign adversary or the United States. But those don't make any sense either from the information. I don't think that Russia would have been sophisticated enough to pull this off. China, I think, would have been, but there's evidence that China hacked the Malaysian government the next day, and then they also released some weird satellite pictures 5 days later. Those are not things that you do if you pulled this off. You would be very quiet if you pulled that off. That's what you do if you know there's something wrong and you're trying to get to the truth. With respect to the U.S. government doing it, doesn't make any sense. They're implicating themselves. If they fake these videos, they wouldn't fake them with their own assets filming the plane in 2 different perfectly in sync videos. They would implicate Russia or somebody else to do it, right? And then they would also promote the videos. Nobody to date has promoted these videos. I'm pretty much the biggest advocate in the world.
How did the videos come to you? I never understood that part.
Yeah, they didn't come to me in any way. That's the other thing as well. So, and that's where people, and I think it's good to lay the foundation for this for people that aren't super familiar with the case, is that they had reemerged on social media on Reddit back in the summer, this last summer, in early August, and they blew up on this subreddit called UFOs. There was only thing anyone was talking about for over a week, and people were digging into all the aspects of it. And I just started documenting what people were doing early on until it got suppressed from that subreddit. The Mick West debunk of this Pyromania VFX, which again is a statement of fact, does not actually match. It's a weird contention point where, like, I think that some people just reject the evidence of their eyes and ears on that one. But they got that suppressed from all of Reddit. So if the government is trying to promote something, they don't suppress it, and they usually try to promote it. One of the earliest things we found out was that the videos on the Wayback Machine go back to a deleted YouTube account called Regicide Anon. And we can see from the Wayback Machine that they say in the description, which is not conclusive, but still evidence, it says received March 12th, 2014, which is 4 days after the plane went missing. In the published date, it says published May 19th, 2014, which is roughly 7 or 8 weeks later, actually 9 weeks later, 70 days after the plane went missing. Furthermore, there's many people, probably thousands of people that actually saw these videos back then. I saw the drone video back then personally. I would testify to that fact. And this was well before I would have ever thought these videos were real. I truly think it's only from like 2020, maybe even 2023, that we could even begin to think about these videos potentially being real. And that's the same for myself as well. And that's why when I saw the drone video reemerge on Reddit, I went, wait a minute, what? I saw this video. I remember seeing this 10 years ago and just ignored it.
Are you saying that the same videos had been shown 10 years ago and it was so wild that everybody just wrote them off?
Yep, 100%. And we have proof that they've been out there. There's actually other Reddit posts we saw. They were reposted by other accounts back then. So we have a ton of corroborating evidence that proves conclusively those videos come from 2014 and that predates commercial AI, predates commercial deepfake technology. And that's really where you then start to realize it's very unlikely these were created by any random hoaxer. It would take most likely a team of people. And even the people that are, there's so many people that say, oh, that's so easy, that's so easy. And the truth is that's bullshit. It's not easy. Any real VFX artist will have the honesty to admit it's not easy and that you need a frame of reference for when you do VFX. You don't just build it out of nothing. Even when you make these like CGI movies that look perfectly real, they have people with suits on so that they can manipulate what a person would really look like, right? And then they kind of paint over it. You need a reference, right? And that's the big thing about VFX. There's no reference for these videos. Most of what we see in these videos, especially the small details, are completely unique elements. And what that means is you have to also create a whole storyboard. Like even when I create little videos where I speak over them, I create this storyboard and I say, here's what I'm going to say. I put my different video clips that I'm going to throw in there, right? And that takes hours just to do that part of it, right? Let alone all the editing required. And the big thing too is that there's no discrepancies on any of these videos. It's not like somebody messed up in a frame and all of a sudden there's this big like white spot or that it's not stitched together right, you know, like they're just perfectly fluid. So that's what makes them so compelling is that we know they went back. We don't have what they call it, the providence. Like we don't know actually we do think we know the person that leaked them, but we don't have somebody admitting that they did, right? And that's the difference between a lot of what you see in ufology. Some of those, I took these pictures, here they are, right? We don't have that, but we were able to deduce these, these come from this specific YouTube account. And weirdly enough, we were able to figure out, like, we found somebody that went to prison at the right time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about him. What's his name? Lieutenant Colonel
Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn, right? So I'll just tell briefly the story. This is another, if you guys look at my evidence, all evidence pinned to my profile, he's got his own paragraph and category because of how much evidence there was for this. I put in FOIA requests to the FBI and NCIS regarding him. The FBI rejected it for identity purposes. NCIS rejected it in total to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy. They would not give me anything about his case. We still to this date don't know exactly why he was being charged and potentially with espionage, where they wanted to put him in life in prison. But he was a U.S. military personnel. These are U.S. military assets. We believe the person would have to have been an operator or in his position where he was actually the liaison from these spy planes to upper command, where he would have potentially had access to both of these videos and both of the recordings. The person that leaked these, we think, would have had an emotional reaction, because you see this and you see this plane disappear and you realize they're never going to figure out the truth without these videos, right? And when we look at the videos, the satellite videos cropped. They crop out the drone. The drone has the HUD data removed. It seems like they were trying to minimize the amount of information they had to give to the public, right? It's not a spy because you would just give it to China. You're not going to post it on the internet, right? So it seems like it would have been someone who's actually a patriot who wanted the world to know the truth. And we find Edward C. Lin, every single article talks about signals intelligence. We had been talking about this is how the assets and the satellites communicate using signals intelligence. He hits all the right boxes. He gets assigned to this VPU-2, which is super secret spy plane squadron that he gets assigned there February 2014. Plane goes missing in early March 2014. The case against him, according to his lawyer, which we have a direct quote, says the case against him investigation began April 2nd, 2014. Just weeks after the plane goes missing, right? He gets caught with flight manifests that include search and rescue code names. The defense attorney argued that the classified information in question is available on the internet. We looked at the appeals. The penal codes related to the appeals are consistent with the evidence potentially being videos. It's just everything lines up for this guy to be the guy. They tried to throw the book at him. The defense actually argued that the government was being obfuscating the charges around him and adding a bunch of bullshit like prostitution in order to confuse the media and confuse the public. He basically gets bullied while he's in prison. They threw him in pretrial detainment for 646 days. They didn't want anyone to talk to this guy. And the judge's evidence for that, saying that he's this huge risk, was just like mundane emails. And then the government later on had to admit that it wasn't even really a spy case, that they actually didn't have any evidence that he exchanged any information with any foreign adversary. And you look at all this and you go, okay, this is super weird, right? And you go and compare it to other situations, even espionage situations, the government admits exactly what a lot of people did. But with this guy, they won't say anything about what he did, right? To me, there's basically no chance this isn't the guy that leaked them, or he's directly.
How long is he in prison?
Wait,
How long is he in prison for?
So what happened was he ended up doing a plea deal. So the NCIS and FBI basically convinced him that he made this huge grievous error. Like, he didn't think he did anything wrong. And this also is consistent with the videos, right? Because we look at those videos, what if he just thought they're UFOs, right? What if he didn't even know that this is like our technology? And then you think about it from that perspective and you go, oh, that's why the video is called Satellite Video, Airliner, and UFOs. Because when he leaks it out, he thinks he's just leaking out some UFOs zapping the plane. But then later on, he's getting charged with life in prison and espionage. He's going, dude, I didn't do any of that. I wasn't selling stuff to China. And they go, well, that was our Lockheed Martin orbs. You just revealed to the whole world, right? And this is our secret weapon. And then he goes, oh shit, I didn't mean to do that. And that's why he signs the plea deal. The plea deal means he can never talk again. And even with the plea deal, so I think the only two charges that stuck were the two charges of dissemination of classified information. And his lawyer says he admits to the charges he was actually guilty of. All the rest of the stuff was all just bullshit, right? And he admits to those two charges. For two charges like that, if you look at other people, they get slaps on the wrist like a year, maybe even less in prison. He got 9 years, and they shaved off 3 years for him working with NCIS and FBI. In his appeal, he even argues that it's completely disproportionate to what other people got. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah. One last thing. Where is he now? Is he out? Have you?
Yeah, he got out probably like a year or year and a half ago. We did reach out to him. Only one time. We were able to. I mean, it's really easy to find people like where they've lived and stuff like that. Called a few phone numbers. Found one that was consistent with where he had been living. And the phone rang, and somebody picked up, and they hung up right away. Like, click, click. And I went, whoa, that's weird. Because, somebody, if that's the guy, has to know that I'm sitting here talking about him everywhere, right? I had been already talking about him before that for weeks. You wouldn't want him to go to voicemail because you don't want me to know that that's his real phone number. You also don't want to talk to me, right? Because if you say anything and you have a plea deal, you might be getting monitored, et cetera. And I think if you have a plea deal, you're going back to prison if you talk about it. Plus, we ignored the videos as well. So this is a guy that went to prison for 6 years, right? And we ignored the evidence he threw out there. He probably never wants to talk about this stuff ever again. And I don't blame him. But so I sent him a couple text messages on that phone number afterwards saying, hey, I think you're Edward C. Lynn. My name's Ashton Forbes. You can look at my evidence. You're my hero. I would do anything for you. I would bring my followers to your aid. I would support you financially, anything that you want. I just wanted him to know that. You know, I didn't want to pressure him to come out or anything like that. But there's only a few ways these videos can be authenticated. Him coming out as a whistleblower is one of those ways. The other ways is that if AARO or another government entity looks into the videos and finds out that that's actually a real MQ-1C Gray Eagle video by comparing to other ones with aerial surveillance package, or looking at the Sentient/Cyber system and finding out that we do have video playback capability exactly as we've deduced from the video, those would be the only ways we can authenticate the videos, in my opinion. And Shai, did you have a follow-up? I saw you trying to talk.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, thank you for all that information. That is really fascinating. You should hold more spaces. Okay, so what I wanted to ask you, and sorry, I feel like I maybe represent other people who haven't followed this super closely, because I do remember the flight going missing and seeing it on the news and just chatting with people like, what do you think happened? And that was that, right? It just disappeared. We went to the next story. Um, so what I wanted to ask you in your research, who was on the flight? Or is there anybody that was like significant, important, and why would they go out of their way to make this flight go missing?
Yep, and oh boy, was there. So, and you can again.
So this is great. There's a couple questions asking about who was on the flight. Everybody's super interested about that part, so they'll love this.
Okay, yeah, great. And then after we'll go to Professor, and then I think follow the logo. I had your name wrong. Sorry, follow the logo. So the people on the plane, interestingly enough, there were several conspiracy theories that were out there that actually coincide with what we kind of independently found out as well. The idea of it going to Diego Garcia or ending up at Diego Garcia. And the other one is the people on the plane. There's 20 Freescale semiconductor scientists and engineers on board this plane. They've got this at least cover story or whatever. Maybe it's a real story. There's two different stories out there. One of them, they were going to upgrade the plants in China. And this other one where they were going to a 1 week long training program in China. But it starts to get really bizarre because 20 people, they were all very important people according to the news articles that are out there. Too many people from one company on board the plane. Arwen from the investigative team, she's done amazing work, and she found out all their seating locations. Most of them are all sitting next to each other, except for the ones that for some reason have their families coming with them, and they're sitting next to their families. But basically all the Freescale semiconductor people are sitting next to each other. 8 of them are Chinese nationals, 12 of them are Malaysian nationals, but they work for the American company Freescale Semiconductors. I like to call them Freescale superconductors, because when we look at this technology, we've been talking about superconductivity being essentially an essential element in order for the orbs to be able to have this gravity field, defined field around them, this plasma field, in addition to potentially even just creating the geodesic. Like every aspect of this we think requires superconductivity. And we found a 2005 National Security Agency report, I couldn't believe we found this, that talks about the commercial emergence of superconductive microchips, not just superconductive ones, but room temperature superconductive ones. Freescale Semiconductors listed 9 times throughout this. It's basically talking about their microchips nonstop. In fact, they had just put out a microchip that was so small that it was smaller than a dimple in a golf ball. That was like a week before this. And the weird part is there's this other conspiracy, like this kind of competing conspiracy theory that says like 4 people from this company were on board the plane, and then this patent reverts to the Carlyle Group or something like that. But it turns out none of those people were actually on the plane. So it's almost like they threw this fake conspiracy theory out there that was actually correctly tied to the company just to get people to dismiss it out of hand, as opposed to this idea that these people, there's way too many people on board this plane. They're all sitting next to each other, so they either booked those trips together, which should have flagged the company. The whole thing just kind of stinks. And if this is an espionage scenario, which is where I'm starting to think that it really is, you could imagine these people trying to go to China, defect to China, bring the IP, intellectual property to China, and that this is a scenario where the United States is preventing that from happening, because whoever controls this technology is definitely going to control the world. And you can see that to do a major cover up like this, it's got to be more than about just money. Some people, there's another conspiracy theory about it being gold on the plane. This is not about money. This is about something much bigger than that, in my opinion.
But it might be about money, because also the chief executive of one of Petronas's biggest then acquired oil companies was also meant to be on the plane, but didn't actually get on the plane.
Yeah.
There are two people who are Iranian who actually took passports of Europeans on the plane. And there is the biggest world financial scandal with billions at risk at the time that this plane is in the air. So Ashton's right. There's probably loads of decoys. The full passenger list is available. Anybody can look at it. But there are some really big hitters meant to have been on that plane.
Yeah, and
Sort of
everything.
like
But
how
Kenny, is there videos of people boarding the plane, like at the airport?
I've not seen
There was
any,
people
but,
going through
I've just
security.
seen the Netflix video. Netflix is pretty good. That shows you loads of passengers with their cell phones getting phone calls and they get weird phone problems afterwards. But I won't go into that because that's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, there was images that came out of the Iranian passengers. This is very bizarre. There was 2 Iranians that were on this plane that were using fake stolen passports, that they changed their looks. They were traveling together, changed their appearance to look like the fake passports. There's one of the guys, even the real guy, was on one of the press conferences holding his real passport going, I wasn't on the plane at one of the early press conferences. And this was just dismissed within a few days, and it's even hard to find some of the articles about it. But they've got pictures of them going through security where you can see they look very similar to the people's passports they stole. And that seems very sophisticated to me. This cover story makes no sense whatsoever for those 2 guys. Supposedly they were going to Beijing, but they were trying to flee to Amsterdam. And that makes no sense because, A, if you're on a stolen passport, you want to go through the fewest number of countries possible to get to your final destination. And there's a direct flight from Kuala Lumpur to Amsterdam. You're not flying to Beijing to get to Amsterdam. You're not paying tens of thousands of dollars for stolen passports and international flights. Like, the whole thing just makes no sense. But if this is some kind of espionage scenario related to those Freescale semiconductor scientists, those people could be some type of intel operatives or something like that, right? In terms of making sure this plan goes off without a hitch. Just a thought. Professor, I know you've had your hand up for a while. I want to get to you if you're ready.
Wow, sir, thank you. I'm blown away. First of all, I have to say, your analysis skills are absolutely impeccable. If I'd have met you 40 years ago, you, sir, would have delivered world peace. And I am hoping right now I can fill 2 parts of your whiteboard and get you to the next quantum station quite easily. My role in life has been delivering information technology and business change to the energy industry, started in the UK and moved to the US. Part of that was splitting apart transmission and distribution. When I came to the US, I moved through that over here into retail and then stepped into aerospace and defense. And what do we have there? We have a conflict of interest, but we have shared enterprise resource planning solutions where we have common parts, which are in both commercial aircraft and also international traffic at arms aircraft. So there is no way you are going to find pieces with any part numbers on because they're scared that the Chinese might find out or whoever.
Yeah.
In terms of quantum, sir, where did we start as a race? We started at point B and we got to point C. What did we base point B on? It was on an alphabet that we created from a bunch of stones. And if you look at that alphabet, sir, you will get it very easily. It's illogical. And when you understand that we are an electrical frequency, atoms, that moved from electrical frequency to have form with function and spun up a carbon unit with H2O. But unfortunately, Water doesn't go well with electronics, as we see with Samsung appliances. So what our fellow Einsteins, Hawkings, etc. missed was we came from a void, V-O-I-D. There's no O, there's no I, it's 0 and 1.
Okay.
When you get
Blend.
consciousness, C, which is what? It's knowledge from experience of evolution. You can start to move from one carbon, into a carbon, H2O, move forward. But your objective does not change because we only need hydrogen. But what use is that if you cannot use it?
Yeah. Is there,
right?
I appreciate your insights. Is there a specific question related to the plane regarding that? I mean, I heard the first part definitely.
Well,
the
black plane is the plane did crash, and there's no point questioning it. What are you trying to solve?
Wait, how do you know it crashed?
Because there were parts found. People saw it. If people saw it, 19 people, are they all liars?
Ashton is. Hold on.
Why do we
Ashton,
persist with characters?
Okay, we're gonna just put a pause on that for now. So one thing I do want to address here, I appreciate the insights for sure, is that they're never gonna find the plane or the black boxes, because if there's a conspiracy at play here, then finding the black boxes would reveal that conspiracy, right? This is my opinion, of course. And yeah, regarding the pieces that were found, there was the official search that was the largest, most expensive in history, that searched all along the 7th arc where these satellite pings supposedly say the plane crashed. Above and below water, didn't find a single piece of the plane. The pieces that they found that they tied to the plane were found 3,000 miles away, not by the official investigation or official search, but actually by a random person named Blaine Gibson. He found most of them, not all of them, washed up on the Reunion Island and South Africa and Africa region. So I do appreciate that, though. I do think that the universe is really, you have to think of it in terms of waves, in my opinion. And I don't necessarily believe like all of the electric universe, or at least let's say I'm not decided, but I do think that electricity is definitely a key element in terms of understanding the universe in general.
Well, Ashton, I would challenge. I love that you have come to that exact point, and so here's what I would say to you. I'm in the exact same position, and I'm trying to reconcile, what the Big Bang universe versus the electric universe model. And there are clearly differences, right? The mechanisms in the Big Bang universe are nothing more than explosions and gravity, right? So there's a lot to pull apart there when you start to look at what are the mechanisms it creates and drives all this stuff, and which one of these models. And I'm with you. I mean, everything in the electric universe model or theory doesn't necessarily have to be true, but I think it should be included when we look at what we think the science is behind all this stuff, right? Because we have to change the way we look at it.
And this is why I like you too, is that it's.
I'd just like to jump in real quick.
Yep, no problem. Hang on a second, Carter. Let Ashton finish what he's saying. We got a couple of hands up.
Because here's the thing too.
Let's go to the hands.
I don't like when people say that they know all the answers, right? Because the reality is we should be open-minded, and like you said this idea of reconciling it, right? That's what I'm trying to do here as well. So a lot of people have different theories, right? And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, and I don't know exactly how much of each theory is necessarily correct, but that's how we get to the truth, right? We have a free exchange of ideas where we can try to figure out what makes logical sense, right? So I appreciate you, Shepard. Okay, so. And I know we promised Logo would be able to talk again, so I don't know. Shepard, I'll let you choose who you want to go here.
Carter, did you want to add something to that specific point quickly, or did you want to take us in a different direction? If you're going to go in a different direction, we'll go to the other hands first.
Yep, I'll take a break. Let someone else go first, because this is kind of a spinoff of something that Ashton said earlier.
No worries. I saw a couple of you waving your hands. Wave your hands again if you're ready to speak and you don't have a hand to put up. You're at a computer. We'll go to Blank and then Chai. Go ahead.
Hey guys, Memory Hole 370 here. I don't have much time to talk, but I just wanted to say thanks for hosting the space. This is actually my first time talking in a space. And I don't have a question, but I wanted to say I'm 26 years old. Ashton, I just learned you were 40 yesterday, or maybe even over 40, when I was listening to that Alien Addict podcast. And basically, just wanted to say, I'd be considered way off the deep end in comparison to you as far as what I believe. I don't know if it's because of the predictive programming that I've grown up with. But yeah, essentially, about 10 years ago, I had a DIA agent, the Defense Intelligence Agency. Not many people know about the DIA. It's usually focused on the CIA and the FBI. I had a DIA agent basically break, or I guess you could say whistleblow to me, as my teacher. He basically told us that he participated in a lot of experiments that were involving remote viewing. And I just wanted to say that he basically whistle blew all that to me. I could go in deeper in a different space, but thanks for the space. No questions here. On to the next one. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. Memory Hole 370. I seen you out there. Appreciate your insights. Defense Intelligence Agency, absolutely. That's a real agency. I think I FOIA'd them as one of my many, many FOIAs that I put in as well. And I'm not sure who's the one who has all the cards and who's kind of in control, but I think that if you go to the Vladimir Putin Tucker Carlson interview that was the other week, I think there was a couple key aspects that are important to this case that I felt like Putin was being very forthcoming with information. One of them is that the Americans are just as good, if not better, than propaganda at everybody else. And the other one is this idea that it's not the president that has the most power. It's these various three-letter agencies behind the scenes in the shadows that have the most power. Those are the two major takeaways I took away that when you look at this investigation, you go, yep, that lines up exactly what we've been saying.
And I have a DIA document that Ashton has witnessed and Ashton has used in his YouTube videos. I have a DIA, a DOD, and a CIA document that cover a lot of the technology that we've been talking about in this space. The DIA one is particularly relevant to what that last gentleman just talked about.
Okay, Chai, and then we'll go to follow the logo.
Yeah, for sure. So it's kind of funny, hey? They love their little three letters, USAID, mercenaries of death. Anyways, I'll let Follow go first, but I'm just thinking about this.
All right.
Polly.
Sorry, can you guys hear me? It shows muted.
Yeah, we got you.
On
Go
my
for it.
screen.
You're good.
Okay. So I apologize because this is going back a bit. The conversation has meandered a bit, but the thing that I wanted to speak about was the fact that the spheres that were rotating around the plane in the videos that Ashton's been looking into for some time are actually, Ashton, you describe them as sinusoidal, but in my visual interpretation of them, they're moving in a toroidal pattern. Do you feel like that's a consistent description of the way that those are moving? Because I have a further comment to make, but
yeah, I think both can be accurate. They got graphed out early on, and they show from a two-dimensional graphical perspective, they show a perfect sinusoidal pattern. And the conclusion that I make there is just that we're not looking at aliens or even humans inside little orbs, right? It's too perfect. It has to be some kind of remote control or pre-programmed control, right? With respect to the toroidal, then you'd be looking at three-dimensional space, which absolutely could be. I think it could be interpreted that way.
The reason I bring that up is because the gentleman you spoke to, Bob Grenier, is, in my mind, an expert or way on the bleeding edge of this topic. And for anyone in this space who happens to have heard of Malcolm Bendel, Ashton's referred to him multiple times, but as soon as I came across what Malcolm is doing, for those of you that don't know, Malcolm Bendel is a gentleman who has been working on a technology that is essentially, it's, in simplistic terms, it's making a more efficient internal combustion engine, but the reality is that it's a form of 0 point energy. So many of you in here have probably heard of 0 point energy before. Everything that you will discover or uncover from your own interest in 0 point energy will unveil to you that the toroid is fundamental. The toroid is actually a four-dimensional or a multi-dimensional geometry, and this is the geometry in which the orbs were rotating around the plane. It's the key to zero-point energy in and of itself, and it's the key to reality, which is reality is, if you were to think about it from a geometric perspective, it is a two counter-rotating hemispheres which form a toroid, and a toroid is the natural form that a plasma will take when restrained or conducted within an electromagnetic field. It may sound so obscure to some of you, but really, the toroid is sacred geometry, and
Pythagoras.
Sorry?
Sacred geometry, Pythagoras.
Yeah, well, right. That's related to trigonometry, and of course, there were 3 orbs rotating around the plane, not 4, not 2. The toroidal element of this should not be overlooked. I won't try to go into this right now unless asked upon, but basically, I would encourage everyone here to try to research the properties of the toroid, what a toroid is. It's not a 3-dimensional geometry. It's a multi-dimensional geometry. And this is very closely related to time. And if there was one thing I could say to everyone, is like, I really think we need to start thinking about time differently. We need to stop thinking about time as a half linear dimension, which is like an arrow moving forward and only forward. It's not that. It is very much cyclical, and it's so weird because it's not obvious why that relates to the technology that quote unquote teleported MH370 Diego Garcia. But I'm telling you right now, it is. It's the way that every extraterrestrial spaceship moves between point A to point B. It is about tuning into a specific frequency, a frequency which will not only dictate its place in 3-dimensional XYZ coordinates, but also in time. Time can be thought of as.
You lost. I'm sorry, you lost me. So, are you trying to say, like, what are you trying to say? Like,
I'm trying to say that
these people were pulled into a different time lapse or something?
Possibly. Yeah, I think that it's possible that MH370, amongst many other missing flights, okay, if you look into groups of flights by the Navy that have disappeared and then have been recovered in like the Everglades of Florida, even though the timelines don't match up. The idea is that time is an important or a crucial element of the technology being used here. Okay, so we need to start thinking about time almost in a way of like 3-dimensionality. And the reason I say that is because we live in the three dimensions. We understand it intuitively. So if you start thinking about time that way, you can start thinking about the fact that, oh, like maybe a flight can exist in one time and place, and move to another time while still being in the same place. And the reason I bring that up is because, as I said, there are reports of military Navy flights, multiple planes being lost within the Bermuda Triangle that have been later recovered in the Florida Everglades. Years and years later, there are accounts of flights being lost in the World War II time period that have appeared in modern times. It sounds so crazy, I understand, but we have to broaden our horizon. We have to broaden our horizons here, because time is not a half.
Okay, so I think we've got
linear dimension.
We need to be like landing the plane here, guys. I want to make sure this isn't just a soapbox for everybody. Let's minimize the stories. Let's minimize the soapbox narratives. I appreciate it. I appreciate the insights. The topic here is MH370 and the investigation related to it.
I'm talking about MH370.
Okay, we're dropping you.
I'm talking about that right now. Okay.
Okay, let's not bring him back up, guys. Sorry. So hop fibration is definitely an element of the that is important when we deal with these shapes that we're dealing with in the toroid. And if you look up the hop fibration, you will see that it is like a 4-dimensional kind of toroid that collapses in on of itself. And that is potentially important to the technology. One thing I want to say as well, just to address some of the stuff as well, is that we can't tie everything in the universe together, right? I think that a lot of people are seeking a level of enlightenment that gives them answers to everything that there is. And the reality is that you have to take it piece by piece. Well, the analogy that I give people is you start at the foundation and you work your way up. And the foundation needs to be something that's completely based on science and reason, right? And then you start to build your
First
way
principles
up.
of physics.
Exactly. And you start to build your way up to the more esoteric aspects. And my criticism, and I don't disagree with the idea of sacred geometry. I think that like toroids are absolutely the correct shape as well. But when you're talking about logically explaining these things and getting your way up there, it's not a matter that, okay, sure, toroid's the right shape, but we don't have to dig in and try to tie everything together. We just have to explain what we see. And we say, here's what's happening, here's the behavior we're seeing, and then we work backwards in terms of trying to understand it.
Well, in with all of my recent investigations in the science, one of the aspects, one of the angles that I've taken away is getting away from the scientism that's out there, right? Trying to explain everything and getting back to the basics of what science is supposed to be, and that's explaining what you observe, right?
Exactly.
Explain what you observe, like break it down, like Carter said. He brought up first principles for sure. Just simply look at what what the observations are around the orbs, and we got a long way to go. But we're looking for some explanations that make sense. All right, couple hands up still here, so let's go to a new speaker, Serhi, and then we'll go to you, Chai.
And I think Carter wanted to speak as well. He may not be able to have his
hand up. Carter, if you don't have a hand up, I can throw you in there as well.
Sorry, I actually gave up my turn.
Alright, I'm sorry, lady. I will wait. The lady will tell.
Are you sure? Okay, thank you. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, somebody left. I genuinely just wanted to go back to this because I feel like there's a few people in this space or who've come up, and I think the fact that this flight disappeared brings up all these oh, what could have happened? Was it aliens? Was it spiritual? And it's okay, great. But can we just hear about what really happened that you found out? That's all I wanted to really talk about.
So let's ground it again real quick. And the way I'll do that is I'll talk about what's the evidence this plane didn't crash into the South Indian Ocean. Okay, because that's the big narrative that's out there. And I agree. There's a lot of people that they want to have this explain everything in the universe, right? And I just want to explain why the plane didn't crash in the South Indian Ocean, why it wasn't pilot suicide, and how these videos can potentially be authentic. As opposed to everything else in terms of trying to find all those answers. Like Shepard said, science is just observing reality and then measuring what that observation is. And that's, I think, how we keep ourselves grounded and not kind of fall into these rabbit holes as people would describe them. It also opens you up to scrutiny as well when you start to tie everything together, because then people will use any of these other individual aspects to discredit you and discredit everything you're saying. So plane didn't crash into the South Indian Ocean. Why? Number one, no debris field found, right? It's just impossible to not find a debris field for a 777 crashing into the ocean. It's going to break up into thousands of pieces. All the investigators agree that that's how it would have happened, and yet no giant debris field found. This is why all of the people developed all these alter splinter theories, why Jeff Wise thinks the plane went to Russia, why Florence Ochangi thinks the plane was potentially over in Vietnam, why Cindy Hendry from the Netflix documentary thinks the plane was shot down. It's because they realize you can't just not have a debris field there. But that's also part of the reason why the plane probably wasn't shot down, is that if the plane is shot down in the sky, the debris field's going to be even wider than if it were to crash into the ocean. The experts say the plane crashed at 15,000 feet per minute and would have exploded into thousands of pieces. I've already mentioned that the most expensive search in history didn't find a single piece of the plane. They didn't find any black boxes, even though these black boxes are rated for depths of up to 20,000 feet. The ocean was not too deep to find them. The black boxes, again, would prove the conspiracy. There's 4 redundant ELT emergency transponders that only activate on crash, and yet none of them did. The SOSUS system, which would have heard the Titan sub pop, or which did hear the Titan sub pop, where they lied about it for like 5 days. The Navy said 5 days later, oh yeah, we heard that Titan sub pop and we're going to go pick up the pieces. This is a tiny sub. This would have heard the plane crash into the ocean. Didn't hear anything. Western Australia, Diego Garcia, they have hydrophones as well that also would have heard the acoustic detections. No acoustic detections consistent with the plane crashing into the ocean. They would have pinpointed it if it was the case. There's multiple radars, Thailand, Indonesia, India, and Australia's Jordan system all should have seen this plane on radar, and none of that data was made publicly available. Diego Garcia, Coco Islands, and Pine Gap are also advanced military bases that should have had very strong radars that should be able to track it probably from takeoff to land to quote-unquote crashing. Find nothing. Supposedly crashes on an active shipping route, but nobody witnesses it. There's nobody who sees the plane out there in the South Indian Ocean. Then some people say, well, the ocean's really big, but these people don't think logically because the pings, if these satellite pings are correct, which is the only thing put in the South Indian Ocean, we should know exactly where it crashed. It should be somewhere along the 7th arc. They searched everywhere. There's nowhere else for this plane to go. The narrative has it running out of fuel. The plane didn't go to Antarctica. It didn't even get to Australia. There's not even enough fuel for it to get there. There's nowhere else for this plane to go. So if people come at you and say, oh, well, the plane crashed and we just didn't find it, you say, well, where exactly is it? Right? Because if it's not along the 7th arc, that casts doubt as to the satellite pings in general. And if the satellite pings are incorrect, then this plane literally could be anywhere, including Diego Garcia. The official search...
What was the Diego Garcia? Yeah, what's the Diego Garcia connection, Ashton?
Okay, so I'll get to that in just one second. So also 19 families signed a joint statement saying they could call the victims' cell phones and they were ringing for up to 4 days after the plane went missing. They begged the government to look into the fact that was happening, to like triangulate. They didn't. One person even proved that on national television, and some social media sites still had some of the passengers being logged in as online, which you could explain as whether they had logged in on some other computer somewhere, right? Or it could be on their phone. Now, Diego Garcia, there's actually some evidence that somehow this plane ended up in Diego Garcia. It's pretty weak. It's circumstantial, but it's real. There is 20 people on a small island. I believe it's called Kulo Haduvo. I'm probably butchering that, in the Maldives. That in the early morning hours, like 6:15 a.m. in the morning, they see a large jumbo jet with a red and white stripe of Malaysian Airlines flying low and flying from the west to the south. And this is just north of Diego Garcia. They were dismissed. There's multiple competing theories as to what they quote-unquote really saw. But we're talking 20 islanders who do not see jumbo jets flying low that all see this plane. I believe there's a whispered, this Richard Godfrey guy claims that it's some other flight that does this completely illogical route to supposedly they saw. There's another theory that there's a smaller plane that doesn't have any blue on it at all. Neither of these theories really make a lot of sense. The reason why these people were thrown out is because the plane was coming from the wrong direction. If the plane was MH370, it should have been coming from the east. But if we have a plane that can teleport somewhere, it could be coming from the west and then going south. There was also a Philip Wood, is the only adult American passenger on board this plane, IBM executive. On 4chan, I think about a week later or 9 days later, all of a sudden a post appears on 4chan, which is one of these anonymous internet boards that claims to be from Philip Wood, saying that he's been drugged and held prisoner somewhere. He doesn't know where. And there's a black picture, just all black, that gets posted. People look at the EXIF data in the picture, and it points to Diego Garcia military base. There's also been a FOIA that proves that Diego Garcia was a CIA black site where they would at least transfer like some of these terrorist prisoners they would capture from like Iraq or Syria, and potentially has a whole holding cell underneath there, which could be consistent with that. Now, people say, well, why would he post on 4chan? Why wouldn't he call people? We don't know the exact answer. You can come up with your own theories as to why. But that's the evidence that would point to it being at Diego Garcia, including all of the other people and investigators and conspiracy theories that point at Diego Garcia, including Marc Dugain, who's a famous French author, who supposedly was told to shut up and stop looking into it after he had also concluded that would be the logical place. That's also where I conclude is the only logical place, because if this plane goes to Russia or something, there's going to be tons of radars that are going to catch it, and all of them are not allied with the United States, right, or whoever hid this plane. But if you take it somewhere in the middle of the South Indian Ocean, or in the middle of the Indian Ocean, not South Indian Ocean, where there's no radars around, secretive military base. I've been told this military base is more secret than Area 51. That they might be testing the orbs there. Might even be underground hangars. We looked at this place on Google Google Earth Pro, where you can go back in time on the pictures. And at 2014, all the planes on the runway just disappear. And we found a bunch of dredging contracts for advanced construction where you see nothing on the surface change at all. My opinion is there's something underground there, and that they can potentially even have an underground hangar. And this is the perfect place to hide a plane, break a plane apart, whatever you're going to do. We even found that there was no departures 72 hours after March 8th when the plane went missing. And there's a few other weird connections as well, including all the flight logs apparently had water damage in June of 2014, just a couple months later, and they were all destroyed. So a lot of weird stuff in that base.
Yeah, you know, the weirdest thing that you said right there that really sent signals for me, excuse me, was the 19 families who said they were calling the cell phones and they were ringing. That's wild.
Yeah, and one of them, we've got the video of them proving it on television as well. That's really bizarre. And it's the whole body of knowledge when you look at all this and you go, okay, maybe one or two little elements of it you can dismiss, right? But when you look at all of it like this, you go, this just points to it not crashing in the ocean, right? Like something else happened here. And that's why it's like you look at the videos and you go, this is so hard to believe, but you go, why did the videos tell a story that makes more sense when you take the whole body of knowledge of all the evidence and put it together?
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, we got a couple hands. Serhi, and then Carter, and then Xander. And Ashton, I want to be respectful of time. We're coming up on a couple hours. You let me know.
Yeah, probably maybe 20, 30 more minutes or so.
Okay, let's do 20. Let's just stick with that.
And I know there's a lot of people here too that are new to the case, and I appreciate you guys who are new to the case as well. And like I said, you can go to my pinned tweet and find the evidence that I'm actually reading off on my stream right now if you want to know more about it. I've also done a bunch of interviews, so you can watch any of those podcast interviews. There's so much evidence, though, that on one particular podcast, you usually can't get through all of it. So checking out the evidence list is your best bet. Okay, Serhi, go ahead, bud.
So I want to talk about, there are one principle what we all should remember. It's a common blade. It's like, when you're sitting somewhere and when you're hearing that in another room breaking some plate, it's not a poltergeist. It's 1%, but it's wind. Yeah, it's almost, impossible, but it's wind. So with aliens, we must remember that they can live only in 6 light years, so they can't pass this path like by biological life. Only minerals can come to us from another space system. So answer about why that plane is lost is simple. It's flight, copters, which can collect information from different countries. Every country is important to have speculations about UFO because
I'm not following.
Modern countries have such modern, stealth helicopters, which can do like we see. Even they can see some helicopters, some civil helicopters. So in this point, we can understand that stealth exists, and you will see proof of this if you will watch or note photos of aliens.
Serhi, I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying. Can you just kind of get to the question that you're going to ask? Because I don't want to. I apologize, guys, but it's not the time for a bunch of stories. We just want to get to some questions and get to the next hand. We got a lot of hands up.
Yeah. So, what kind of aliens do you think could exist? If you think they could?
Yeah,
I think he
so
said what kind of
The
aliens.
appearance and other stuff.
honestly, I'm not sure when it comes to that kind of thing. If you want to know my true opinion, I'm not sure if we're dealing with aliens in general. I think that, my opinion, if there is a visitation or non-human intelligence on this planet, that the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis is one I like, just because of this idea that we have not searched much of the ocean in general. But what I will say is that if these videos are true and accurate, and you can make a plane go at superluminal speeds through macroscopic phase conjugation, then this opens the door up to what you were saying about, beings visiting us from other stars that are light years away, because now that travel time goes from hundreds of years down to potentially very, very short periods of time, right? So that's the nice thing about this. If you're somebody that believes that we've got other races visiting us, etc., is that this opens the door to that. And one last thing I want to say about it is that actually Dave Rossi, who is again one of my friends, who's an engineer, he broached the idea of, if we were to turn up LIGO, which is out there looking for gravitational waves where neutron stars are colliding and seeing these huge gravitational waves, if we were to turn that sensitivity up, and if these craft are flying using some type of gravitational manipulation, like creating a bubble around them, it's possible we might detect all of these crafts flying around all over the place in outer space. They just potentially needs to be more sensitive. And I like that idea, because you've got this SETI program that's been looking for radio signals and communications out there, right? But it hasn't really borne any fruit. And what if the reason for that isn't that they're necessarily covering it up, but that we're just not looking for the right signatures? Maybe what we really need to be looking for is small gravitational waves that are being produced by crafts that can do similar things to what we see in the MH370 videos. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Carter, you're up.
Thank you guys for the platform. I'll be very brief. Thank you for everyone sharing the what, the where, and the why. But I'd like to take a quick second to investigate the why. When we see an event like a MH370 or a World Trade Tower 7, where hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are lost and lives are taken at the whim of a hat, we can automatically rule out, was this for money? Was this for profit? Because that immediately voids itself. Then you'd have to think, okay, why did this happen? Is it some sort of manipulation or control? If you look at the world government structure, how the intelligence agencies and the world banks are hand in hand, and the powers that be that make these events happen, you'd have to immediately rule out the.
Oh, I think we lost him. So I'll just kind of, since he looks like he disconnected, I'll kind of address some of that as the why, and I think that this is the part where I'll bring up a very weird letter to me that appeared on YouTube. It's called, you can Google it right now if you want, I believe it's called Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes. It's voiced in an AI voice, but we don't think that it was produced by AI. It seems like it's a pretty original and creative writing that goes into it. And it presents this idea of espionage and claiming that most of the problems in the world are for political reasons, for conflicts between nations and things like that in general. And that's what I'm starting to think that that's actually the most powerful narrative here at play, is this idea that you've got these free-scale semiconductor scientists defecting. They're going to China. They're bringing the intellectual property with them, because if this technology is real, this is, whoever has this, it's game over. You win, right? And then at that point, if you're the one who has it, you want to prevent everybody else from getting access to it for as long as possible. Eventually, other people are going to figure it out, right? But you want to have that access as long as possible. It's like having, the only one who has nuclear weapons, right? But this is magnitudes more impactful than that, and there's more capabilities as well. You have this teleportation, you have total destruction of a planet potentially being possible, as well as free energy. All these things have huge socioeconomic and geopolitical impacts, right? So that's why when I look at all of this and you take that body of evidence and you say, okay, this seems crazy, but these videos seem to make the most sense compared to other stories, as crazy as that sounds, then the why is got to be for some major geopolitical type reason, right? And the reason also then why they wouldn't be revealing this technology is for that same reason. It's potentially classified higher than top secret, higher than nuclear weapons are classified, and the total impact, right? If you're somebody like me who thinks there's like kind of a ruling elite group of people that make most of the decisions in the world, These are people who know about this stuff, that are profiting off of it. They're making sure they're the ones who are invested in the companies that have it, etc. And if you want, like, just as a basic company, if you think, well, this could impact the markets, right? This is what I thought early on. I went, well, if we have room temperature superconductivity and microchips like that, then I want to be looking at semiconductor stocks, right? Companies that are quote unquote semiconductors, because if they've actually got superconductivity, these companies are the future, in my opinion. This is not investment advice, but I did personally invest in some of these companies because I figured that makes sense. And I looked at the historical markets for them, and they've gone up a lot in many of the recent years, which, last thing I would say is that, again, in my opinion, and this is not investment advice, is that I like to have my money where these elite people put their money, right? Because that's where I feel like it's the safest if all of this kind of stuff is true.
Yeah, I think any technologies that our billionaires building bunkers are investing in right now is probably a good idea. They probably have a leg up.
Yeah, they know something we don't, right?
They know something we don't. That's for damn sure. Go ahead, Xander.
Nice. Yeah. So, Ashton, you've spent some time. I think you've dealt with the quote unquote debunkers and skeptics pretty well. I'm curious what you think of some of these pro narrative figures going around. Like, there's one quote unquote whistleblower that did an interview with Michael Sala about Diego Garcia, and he said some wild things about it, as well as there was one person, I think it was on LinkedIn or was it Twitter, who claimed he got phone calls about coordinates about the black box and then got harassed by the Malaysian government. So I'm just curious, are there any pro-narrative people that might be poisoning the well, or are they onto something? I'm just curious if you've heard these stories and what you think about them.
Yeah, I've heard a couple. So I think that there's some stuff out there where the further away from when the plane went missing, the less credibility I give anything. So there's the 2018 Twitter cryptic message somebody got. I don't think there's any connection there at all to the case. I don't think people are sowing intentional disinformation. Some people are probably just doing it for attention or whatever the case may be. But there doesn't seem to be any ties to the evidence and the facts related to the investigation regarding that. There's also some stuff, people look at some stuff that's like remote viewing stuff, and there is some stuff that is somewhat similar related to that, but you have to be very careful when it comes to anything when you're broaching on esoteric aspects like psychic readings and things like that, because you can interpret those things in a lot of different ways. But so far, I haven't seen anything that is very compelling or compelling enough from either of those elements to tie them to the case. And I've gone on record many times to say that I wouldn't be tying anything regarding psychic powers or remote viewing to the case, no matter what, just because of the nature of it in general. And there are people, I'm not saying that there are people that are in this case are doing it, but there are people that do lie and cheat and steal people and use their good faith in those types of things to enrich themselves. And I don't want to be any part of that.
Awesome. Any more questions? Yeah, go ahead, Blank. Go ahead.
Just jumping back in to say, yeah, that's, the reason I'm here is because we're really focusing on the science and making that connection, the science and the technology. And without that, I wouldn't really be paying attention to this case at all. I know Ashton has said before that he sometimes wishes he wasn't even the one leading this investigation, but we're definitely all happy he is, because that's what he focuses on. So
yeah, appreciate you, man. Yeah, and I think that anybody could do this. It doesn't require any superpowers in general, and I hope that there are more open crowdsourced investigations like this going forward into anything else that's mysterious or we feel like we're being lied to that's out there. And I do, many times I've also said that I wish in these videos we didn't see orbs circling around the plane and disappearing it, because I think that if those aspects weren't in these videos, no one would even question the legitimacy of them. That's how much I think there's a cognitive block for people that look at the videos. And you see it all the time, not just mostly from skeptics, right? But even people that aren't necessarily skeptics, that they look at it and they go, no, that's just impossible, right? And therefore they base their entire opinion on the idea that it must be impossible. And then they're looking for an excuse, some sort of confirmation bias in order to rule it out. And a lot of times they don't even have logical arguments. They won't even entertain the argument because it seems so impossible. And that's why I think the science aspect is so important. And there's many of you like Blank out there that, and myself, that I think to me that's the most interesting aspect, is there's this huge scientific aspect that checks out from a theoretical physics perspective. It's not a matter of breaking the laws of physics or needing new physics. It's a matter of simply either rediscovering the physics that's already been out there, stuff like scalar potential, scalar waves, evanescent waves, or bending the laws of physics. And there we're talking about stuff like not the plane moving faster than the speed of light, but actually there being moving the space around the plane, right? And making a bubble around the plane. And there's a significant difference there. And the same idea of we're not breaking the laws of thermodynamics. We're simply opening the system up, like opening Pac-Man's mouth, to now allow us to borrow the energy from the latent energy of space-time itself in order to then get more energy out than we are locally putting in. And when you think about those types of elements and think about that, and at the end of the day, what does that require for that to be real? It really requires that there's an underlying framework to our universe that we are not perceiving from our local reality. You can call that an extra dimension if you want. I like to call it the underlying matrix, because the Matrix movie, in my opinion, hits the nail on the head with a lot of aspects around this, including the NPCs and people that aren't awake, right? But you can call it whatever you want. Some people also call it the aether. A lot of different terms for it. The last thing I'll say on that is that the terminology we use matters. It shouldn't have to matter, because at the end of the day, like Shepard was saying, science is a matter of just observing what's happening and then trying to understand it and explain it. But a lot of people check out when you use certain terms. If you start talking about the ether, right, people go, oh, this person's in the woo, right? Or if I start talking about portals, a lot of people check out on that. But if you start talking about macroscopic phase conjugation and using specific scientific terms, or phase transitions and things like that, now you start to open yourself up to where these people who might be skeptics that are knowledgeable about physics go, wait a minute, that's a real physics term. Let me look into that a little bit, right? So that's just a little bit of advice I have for the people that are out there. And once again, I just want to say too that I do not ever make fun of anyone else for anything they ever believe, right? And I don't know all the answers to the universe that are out there, but I do think that we should take things chunk by chunk and not try to connect everything else that's out there and try to understand it all at once. We can get to an overall understanding by taking it piece by piece and building our house from the bottom up. So, Shepard, do you have any other thoughts, or anybody else?
Yeah. We can probably wrap up here. We don't have any hands. It's probably a good point. Let me just add, like when I see the video of the orbs around the plane, and then I hear about the lithium-ion batteries. And I look at the video of the orbs, and each of the orbs you can see they're bipolar, right? There are two poles to the orb. There's a dark spot and there's a bright spot, right? That's different. Obviously, it's temperature based or something, right? There's real physics going on there, right? That's the universe that we live in, right? Every planet has a bipole. The sun is connected to all of our planets via these types of currents, and I'm just excited to find out what you're going to learn along the way with this. I want to definitely check back in with you. I'm more of a subscriber to the electric universe, not that I completely understand it, but that I want to use it to kind of claw back at what I understand about gravity and some of the laws of physics that aren't necessarily probably complete concepts at this point. I think that we live in special times. We're on X. We're in this element of global consciousness where we're all learning from each other and across the planet, and things are becoming more and more true. So, hey, man, I'm excited for you wherever you take this. It was really interesting to find out that you're going to move on to the science aspect of it and quit dealing so much with all of the the naysayers and the debunkers and all that crap. I'm sure it's exhausting. So, what do you want to leave us with to kind of wrap up?
Yeah. So, maybe I'll address a little bit of the stuff that's been out there. I did talk to several major podcasters. There's a lot of disinformation out there. You got to be careful. It doesn't come directly from me. You shouldn't probably take it at word of mouth. But I did have Joe Rogan reach out to me. That was this big drama that was going on this last week, and he ended up backing out because of some of the debunkers and some of the stuff that they had put out there. And that's totally his imperative. He can do whatever he wants. But I do think that over time, this evidence and this science specifically will start to get proven to be true as more and more leaks out to the public sphere, as our scientific understanding in the public realm starts to get more closely aligned with the science that's being suppressed from us. And I think that at the end of the day, this kind of stuff will, we will be vindicated in terms of what we've been talking about here today. And that's why I'm moving into the scientific side of it, is that I find that exciting. Like Shepard was saying, like I don't know if it's more of the electric universe side or more of really trying to just better understand the Newtonian and Einstein physics. But that's what I want to learn, and that's what I think is exciting. If you guys want to know what would be like the next thing scientifically that's coming out, in my opinion, it's probably going to be room temperature superconductivity, potentially both from metamaterials like LK99 or other substances, as well as the idea that we can induce superconductivity, room temperature superconductivity, just through electrical means and magnetic forces. And when that stuff comes out, just that alone will change everything about the way we live our lives on a daily basis. And that will start to unlock some of this other stuff. The very last thing I'll say is that this is not a situation where you can have one thing or the other when it comes to the science, is that this is a Pandora's box, that when this science starts to get authenticated, the whole Pandora's box is going to open up and all of it's going to come flooding out at once. And in my opinion, that's what explains why it's been suppressed, is that you would think, well, just give us the medical healing, just give us the free energy, right? But no, what comes along with that is that individuals might be able to develop weapons that are well beyond nuclear weapons, that are very destructive, very scary, and we have to have a framework for how we prevent that type of thing from happening. Chai, did you have a last thought for us or a question?
I did have a last question. Sorry, Ashton. I don't know if I missed this, but did you go over your basic analysis of what you think happened? Because you had mentioned that there was these like superconductor company on the flight. So my question is basically like, why didn't they just crash the plane, or like why would they have to make it go missing? Like, do you think that that was like them just experimenting some new technology or something? Like, like what is your basically like what is your conclusion after all this research?
I mean, so once you find out about the fire scenario, that's when you immediately start to think, oh, well, they're rescuing the plane, right? Because this plane's doomed if it's on fire. If it tries to land in the ocean, it's going to break apart. Everybody's going to drown or die from the impact. So very briefly, what I'll say, and I guess this is a good thing to close it, is that so this plane takes off at 16:30 UTC. It's going to Beijing. It goes dark about 40 minutes later over the South China Sea, which is east of Malaysia and Thailand. This is where you have Mike McKay see the plane on fire. This is where you have 9 witnesses along the coast hear loud noises. This is where we believe the lithium-ion battery is exploded. This is where the plane goes dark. The plane turns back around 10 minutes later when it's turning, going towards Penang, the closest airport it can go to land that has a long enough runway. There's a communication with another 777 pilot that didn't want to be named, that said that they heard the pilot and the co-pilot with a bunch of static. There's also then 8 fishermen on a boat who see the plane flying low. This is also going to be consistent with them battling the fire, depressurizing the plane in order to allow enough oxygen for the passengers to breathe, because the fire extinguishing devices are sucking the oxygen out of the plane. And then the plane gets to Penang, doesn't land for whatever reason. The co-pilot's cell phone pings a cell tower, meaning it had to be flying really low, potentially under 7,000 feet in order for it to ping. Then it goes out to the Nicobar Islands. And so now this is a situation again where this plane is doomed. Whatever it is, if it couldn't land on the land, then it's pretty much a doomed situation at that point from talking to pilots, and it would have been a judgment call. So there are Cope Tiger and Cobra Gold exercises that were going on between the United States and Thailand. Actually, the theme of the Cope Tiger exercises were search and rescue. They would have had some of their most advanced equipment there. They potentially even had communication and rendezvoused, or were potentially rendezvousing. We don't know. But if so, those communications would have been classified, and that's why we would not know about them. And we would think that the last communication was the Goodnight MH370 one. But they potentially, from looking at the videos and Catherine T's sighting, they were potentially planning a landing in the ocean right there, near potentially these military assets. So the pilots may not even have known they were about to get orbed. But definitely, in my opinion, since the plane was doomed, you don't need to destroy the plane, right? You can just let it crash at that point. So this is where the motive is probably either espionage, where you're preventing these people from going to China and you're taking them, or you're trying to save your own people, or another theory of there being like a VIP on board this plane that's so important and very connected, because as we've come to realize here, there's this elite group of people that potentially control the world. Maybe one of these people is very connected on board this plane, and they called in their rescue me button. Hard to say. We can't say for sure. There's also this element, which I think is unlikely, that they're just testing this out on the plane. You don't need to test it out on 239 people, though, right? You would just test it out on a plane that doesn't have anybody on it, or what have you. So I leave it to you guys to come up with your own opinions on what you think happened. My goal from the beginning was simply to find and dig through all the evidence and present that evidence to the world, not behind any paywalls, not with any announcements for announcements or coy things about wait till next week and I reveal the next piece of information, right? Just as it comes on in. And I think that we've accomplished that goal. So I never would have thought we would find this much evidence. Never in a million years would I have thought that. Never in a million years would I have thought that all the science in those videos would be checking out, and that people would be coming to me, talking to me, saying that, oh, your speculations of harmonic superconductive orbs are spot on the money, right? And that's just more of the reason why I think it's all legitimate, just from my own personal frame of reference regarding this. And I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat, including people like Shai Keenan, who's a visual effects expert herself, one of the first people that I was talking to, where she helped me understand part of the reasons why this would be very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to fake from a visual effects perspective as well. And I think that if you listen to people, anyone who says they know all the answers doesn't. Any of the people that says stuff would be easy to do, usually it's not. You should be skeptical of people that come out with bold claims that don't have the evidentiary support behind them, and come to your own conclusions. That's what I would leave everybody here with tonight.
Ashton, it was awesome. Thank you so very much. Really look forward to everything you're doing. You are going to end up in Joe Rogan. It's going to happen. I got you first. One of the very lucky few. So I appreciate that. And we'll check in with you some more. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Ashton, thank you. Good luck to everything you're doing. We'll be paying attention.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good night.
Okay, chat. That was fun. That was a pretty awesome space. Shepherd of Truth is a smart guy, man. Really smart guy. He knows diamonds, so you got to assume he's going to be smart. We were in another different space with him earlier this week about the Palestine-Israel conflict, and they were very knowledgeable about the situation. I was surprised. I mean, I've lived overseas, so I have a pretty good detector when it comes to people that are knowledgeable about geopolitics and stuff like that, because generally people that haven't lived overseas and seen how other people live don't really understand how different it is from the United States. And he definitely does. So I think this was a good one, guys. Do you have any last questions before we close it out? I think we hit most of the points on my list. I don't think we missed very much. There's only a couple detractors and people that were kind of going onto their own stuff. I think we got all of it, though, pretty much. Yeah. I think it's interesting. There's some people that say, why is this MH370, which is like the least controversial aspect of those videos. Like, they were tagged MH370. It's a perfect silhouette. It's clearly a 777-200. The time frame makes it so that it has to be MH370. It's pretty bizarre how some people come up with some of that stuff. But I got to take a break, guys. I'm going to close out this stream for now. And we'll see if I do log in again. It's probably not going to be till a little bit later tonight, and then we can look at some science. But I got to take a little break, do some other stuff, edit some more podcasts. But thank you guys for being here today, and I'll hit you up later. If you're not in the Discord, we can get a Discord invite out to you. In fact, I'll post a Discord invite in the chat for anybody else who wants to join. I'm just going to make it like the first, let's say, 10 people. So if you're not in Discord, you want to join, go ahead. That's the easiest way to find out if I'm online. Otherwise, go ahead and subscribe and set your notifications, and then you'll find it out. Appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you guys later.